Hey, everybody, welcome to LTG Live. My name is Aaron Holt, Director of Lead the Generation, and my good-looking brother over there, Peter Reeves, our co-host.
What's up, man?
How are you,
what
my
up?
friend?
What up? Doing well, man. Obviously, we got the memo. Black sweatshirt day.
Yeah, it's Black Sweatshirt Day. Yeah, absolutely. My home church just gave these out for Pastor's Appreciation Month. So
I like those, man.
Yeah. I was like,
what did you match that sweatshirt with? What do you got on your feet?
Oh, I got a pair of Adidas on right now. So
Okay,
you need me to take them off so you can see them? Or
Yes, absolutely. I need to see them.
Okay,
this is an important part of the This is an important part of the process.
Okay, there we go.
Okay, all right. I see.
Not bad. It
Not
works.
bad.
It works.
Not
It
bad.
works. All right. Okay, good.
That's cool. I like it.
Wait, you're not going to show us?
I'll show you what I got on. I'm always ready. It's Wednesday. It's Wednesday.
Your flip flops with your black dress socks on.
It's Wednesday night, man. So
let's
I
go.
Put on some low tops, man. Nothing new.
So good. Well, hey, listen, we welcome everybody to LTG Live podcast and live stream. We're glad that you're with us, and we are sponsored by leadthegeneration.com. And if you want to check anything out about what we do, what we're all about, we want to resource and develop and equip youth pastors across the nation. We have online conferences. We have our weekly podcast. Peter, we have a student leader podcast coming soon next year. I wasn't supposed to say anything about that yet, but okay, it's coming. It's coming.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And we also coach a couple hundred youth pastors throughout the country right now. And so if you're interested in any of our coaching, go to the website, leadthegeneration.com. Check out who we are, what we're all about. And we would love to connect with you. And we welcome all of you with us today. We're glad that you've joined us. If you're joining us after the live stream on our podcast, we welcome you to the podcast, and we're glad that you're here with us as well. So, Peter, before we introduce our guest, what's new in your life? Anything fun? Anything exciting?
Dude, nothing new in my life. Just we're making it happen, dude. Actually, no, that's not true. My mom is moving to Michigan in December,
Really?
And so she closed on our house, and it's time to bring a little more of the East Coast here, man. And she's like, I want to be around my grandbaby. So she bought her house, like she bought it, paid for it. It's good to go, and she's moving in December. That's a big deal.
That's awesome. And she moving in with you guys?
Absolutely not. She bought a house.
Wait, I missed that part. I guess I was thinking like, wow,
she
Peter,
bought a house.
You're such a generous guy, man. That's
nah,
amazing.
I love her. She needs her own space. It's not for me. It's for her.
I love her. Just not that much, but I love her. She's wonderful.
I love her enough to give her own space. There you go. We love it.
Oh, dude, you just like I see what you did there. I see. That's good. That's good. That's so good. Well, hey, before we introduce today's guest, we want to let you know next week we have Steve Mason with us. Steve is the District Youth Director for the Alabama District in the Assemblies of God. And so, Steve, we're excited you're going to be joining us. That's going to be a great discussion, talking about leadership, talking about youth ministry. But today we have a great friend of mine, a great friend of Lead the Generation. His name is Wayne Morgan. He is the National Ministries. That's a lot of pluralization going on there, but he is the National Ministries Director for National Network of Youth Ministries. So, Wayne Morgan, how are you?
Good, man. How are you?
I just completely butchered your title.
Bro, I'm a 7 on the Enneagram, so I don't care about titles. I just make up a new one next week. I'm like, what's it going to be?
Yeah, it's so good. Hey, man, well, we're so glad that you're with us. For any of you that are joining us right now, if you've ever been a part of any of our conferences, whether one of the live conferences that we've had at Valley Forge or New England or our online conference that we did this past year, Wayne has been a big part of our conferences and being there, hosting breakouts, and been a big part of that. So, Wayne, we're grateful for the relationship that we've been able to build with you as a ministry. And you and I were lunch buddies for years there when I was living out closer to you.
I know. I'm missing lunch in the caboose, man. Like, Aaron asked me to come down to Tannersville where he's living, and we're like, "Hey, man, let's just meet." And he's like, "It's a caboose," and I'm like, "What?"
It sounds terrible, doesn't it?
It does. It just sounds. I mean, it was a cool place, but yeah, when you gave me directions to it, I was like, I had no idea what to expect.
Peter, it was the best authentic Indian food that you could find anywhere. I don't know.
Yeah.
Do you
Got
like
it.
Indian food? Because
I
it was
love
really,
Indian
really
food.
good. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. Amazing.
Yeah.
It was amazing. So Wayne's making it sound not nearly as good as what it was. I promise you.
You're right, exactly. No, it was that first impressions, like, yeah, just go to the old train track, and I was like, wow, okay.
Yeah, so
But it was
good.
great food, great time.
We're glad you're here. My wife is on the chat right now. She says hi, and so there it is right there. She's talking Indian food, and
Hey, Julie.
she's saying hi to Wayne, and Quentin, we see you as well, man. We're glad that you joined us, and
Yes.
everyone else, go ahead, say hi in the chat. We'd love for you to be a part of today's conversation. We're going to be talking with Wayne on the topic of bonus round living.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is going to be great conversation, Wayne. I know a little bit of your story, and I'm excited for many others to hear a bit of your story as well. Also excited for you to meet my good friend Peter, because I know that you guys both have a lot in common. So I'm excited about this. Before you jump into your story, Wayne, tell us a little bit about your family. And tell us also a little bit about National Network of Youth Ministries and what you do for them. Some of our audience might not be familiar with the organization that you're a part of.
Yeah, totally, man. I was just hoping you wouldn't ask what shoes I was wearing, because I'm barefoot right now. So, and I couldn't help but notice the disappointment Peter had when you pulled your Adidas up. I was like,
he was not happy.
He was not. It was like, he was like, bro,
come on, man.
Bring better next time.
No,
what are you doing?
Listen, okay. I have better, but it was raining really bad this morning when I left the house, and I'm like, I'm leaving better inside right now.
That's true.
No judgment.
No judgment, but I could just sense he just was a little bit sad. He tried to hide it, but he was a little sad. And I'm barefoot, so it would be completely disappointment there. So yeah, man. So I'm barefoot because I have two high schoolers, and they just bought basketball shoes this week. So I am poor.
Wait, it's okay. We will love you in your season.
That's exactly right.
Peter, that's coming. I just want you to know that's coming. Your kids are going to get older, and your shoes are going to get worse.
My kids are doing Bible quiz. They don't need shoes.
Yeah. So yeah, I've got a 17-year-old daughter and a 15-year-old son, and both playing ball, at least until they shut it down, or they're just going to play ball anyway. But so that's what we're busy with right now. And then I've got a 10-year-old son who wants to be as good of a basketball player as both of those two older players are. So yeah, and I've been married to my wife for 20 years. We've been doing youth ministry like the entire time. Started out at a church, small little rural church, for a whopping $5,000 a year, and just loved youth ministry. And then was able to start working with Youth for Christ, and that was our area's youth ministry. And so that was when I actually was, when I got sick. And so that's what started opening up some of the doors for other things. While I was sick, I started just meeting with pastors and realized the loneliness that pastors had, and started to realize they didn't know one another. Like they've been in the same area for 15, 20 years and never met the pastor next door. So just started introducing people, started doing coffee, and then introducing two people. Like I would have coffee with two different people and then staggered the times so that they would have to accidentally meet one another. And because they wouldn't come if I said, hey, would you want to have coffee with, so-and-so? So I was a little strategic that way. And that opened up the door to work with National Network of Youth Ministries. So I tell people my job is to help pastors and youth pastors get along. So
I laugh every time you say it, and at the same time, inside in my heart, I'm sad because like that we actually need someone to help us as youth pastors, like want to build relationships with one another.
Yeah. Networking is like such an essential part of business. It's an essential part of like any profession, except for when you get into ministry. And then ministry, it's like you got to encourage people to come out. You got to tell them that they're not alone. And in reality, we're the ones that should be modeling it for the rest of the world. So
yeah. Well, that's great, man. We're excited for how God's using you with National Network of Youth Ministries, and I've had the opportunity to not just build a relationship with you, but also see the fruit of some of your ministry as well. And it's just been encouraging to me to watch how God's using you and raising you up, there in our region for a while, and then even now, in the national role that you're in. And so I know on a personal level, Wayne, this month for you is a celebration of your 14-year anniversary for being an overcomer and survivor of cancer.
Yeah.
And it's a big part of your story, the battle that you went through, and also how God brought you through that. So tell us a little bit about your story. And I know that you have some different lessons along the way that you've learned. And Peter and I just want to, hear your story and then ask you some questions about it, and just be inspired and be full of hope because of what God's done in your life and through your life.
Yeah, man. And I would say if anybody wants to drop a comment, there's nothing you can ask that won't be offensive to me, because I'm a testicular cancer survivor. So once you get to that level, people are like, oh, okay. So yeah, for me, being in ministry, I was full-time with Youth for Christ, and started to have pain in my back and went to the doctor, thought I had a kidney stone, and they actually admitted me from the ER and said, Mr. Morgan, you have cancer. It's all the way through your body. So I had a back pain for about 2 months, which ended up being a tumor that wrapped around my left kidney. And so the cancer had spread all the way through my body. And so I had innumerable spots in my lungs. I had a thing around my liver, and just the entire time just going, hey, God, what are you doing here? Like, I'm a professional Christian. I don't know if you know this or not, but I'm totally on your side, And so I literally, October 16th, I was ordained. So I went through that ordination process. I don't know what your ordination process was like, but apparently you shouldn't invite people from other denominations to be a part of your ordination council, because they argue with each other through you. And
isn't that wonderful? Yeah.
I had an 8-hour interview for ordination. So it was pretty intense. So and one of the men that was on the council said, normally we ordain people into ministry, but we actually ordained you into your biggest fight of your life. And but man, that prep, like I had to study and know who God was, and I had to understand him at such a deep level that when I was diagnosed, I was like, all right, God, you better show up. Like I know that this looks really, really bad, but if you're really who you say you are, and prayer does what we say it does, then I want as many people praying for me as possible, right? Yeah. And so I started calling people up, and literally had a friend of mine, real good friend. He was like, Wayne, I'm not sure I can say this testicular cancer from the pulpit. And I was like, well, then call it unspoken cancer. I don't care. I want as many people praying as possible. So it was a huge process. Started doing chemotherapy, did stuff through Sloan Kettering, because Sloan Kettering's like the top name here in the Northeast that you can go to. But even when we went there, the doctor was like, out of 8,000 cancer patients I see a year, I see 5 to 10 that are as progressed as yours. And so we were like, all right, so statistically, like, what are you talking about? And he's like, well, like I said, because of how few people we see, I'm going to say about 40% chance of survival. And I was like, well, statistically, Jesus shouldn't have been born that Mary was a virgin and all, so like, like our God's way bigger than statistics. Our God has the ability to pull off miraculous stuff. And, even if that miraculous thing is in my kids' lives, right? Like, even if all these prayers don't go unanswered, right? Like, there's still power in prayer. So, I just didn't know if it would be in my family's life or in my wife's life, but I was like, God's gonna do something. And so that's, the process was about 2 years long, November 26th of 2006, I was diagnosed, and April 17th of 2008, I was pronounced cancer-free, or my cancer was in remission. Wow. man, the stories that I have nowadays, I just tell the story until, when I go into camps, I tell the story to the point where almost 3 or 4 people look like they're going to pass out, and then I back off, because I have so many stories. I've had kids pass out in health class, all sorts of stuff. Yeah. So ultimately, I tell people all the time, my story is that God still fixes broken stuff, right?
Mhm.
Like, that's what he's in the business of doing. There's nothing too broken, too far gone, no statistic that says, yeah, I cannot fix this. And so sometimes he heals us physically, but sometimes he heals us emotionally. He always heals us spiritually. That's what Jesus came to do. All we have to do is ask. And so there's a lot of healing that can happen, but a lot of the time we are just so worried about our everyday life that we forget that our God still has the power to heal and to fix and to change. So,
Wayne, I want to ask a quick question. Like during that time when you first found out that you had cancer, like you were still in ministry, right? You were still doing ministry in it. What was the process like praying for people to get made well or to be healed when you were going through what you were going through?
Bro, the last 10 or 15 years, that survivor guilt, I don't know if that has been really difficult because when you're praying for somebody, when you're both battling it together, right? And you're like, hey, God, I know you have the power. And especially when you're in the middle of it, we were both at that space where we didn't know, God, answer our prayers. And then when you survive and the person you're praying for didn't, that probably is one of the most difficult spaces for me emotionally. I know God has a promise. I know that God has a call. I know that he is using our stories, but when there is somebody that you're praying for and he says no, and he goes, I'm going to call him home because that's what's best emotionally, for me, I'm like, all right, God, I still have a job. I'm still here for a purpose. So I don't know if that answers your question or not.
For sure. Yeah, it does.
So good, man. So good.
But yeah, it's one of those things that is a very difficult thing. Survivor guilt is real. And so whenever you do have that anniversary, it is that moment where you go, hey, thank you, God, for what you've brought me through. And there's a major part where I just remember the people who have not survived along the way. And it's a very holy moment. It's one of those sacred spaces where you go, God, I know there's more. I wish I knew everything, but I'm just going to trust you and hold on right here.
So when you mentioned to me when we were talking over the last couple of weeks, just getting ready for today, that there were some pretty significant, spiritual lessons that God taught you, and in the midst of this battle. And I think all of these are probably not just applicable for people that are facing the type of challenges you're facing, but in the year that we're living this year, 2020.
Bro, I know.
I know this is because I can look ahead. I know what your notes are and everything. But walk us through, some of these different lessons, some of the things that you sent me in advance and said, hey, here's a couple of things, big spiritual lessons that I learned, going through this. And let's just talk it through. I think this is going to be encouraging to everyone who's listening. For those of you that might be just joining us, Peter and I are talking with Wayne Morgan, National Network of Youth Ministries, national coordinator and cancer survivor, and talking about some spiritual lessons that he's learned through that journey. So go ahead, Wayne, just jump in and we'll just chat it out here a little bit. It's going to be a great conversation.
Yeah, man. One of the things that I learned was today, one step at a time. You're like, everybody is, or especially right now with COVID and some of those other things, we feel like we've got to project years in advance. Like, what do we have to do? And it puts so much pressure on us. And we almost forget that Jesus even said, today has its own troubles, right? And going through cancer, there were moments where I'm a fairly athletic guy, right? But there were times when it was work for me to walk to the mailbox and to walk back to my house. You were spent. There were times where I would walk to the mailbox, put the mail in the mailbox, sit down on the steps, and get up enough energy to get back to the house. And so, there is there's so many things in our lives that we are looking forward to, that we're actually making our life more complex by thinking about all what are we going to be doing in 2021, or what's 2021 going to be looking like. But the reality is, today is what we're supposed to be worrying about. Today is the day that we're supposed to be thinking on and focusing on. And so don't allow the battle that you're facing. It's just one step at a time. And my wife was actually diagnosed with an illness this past spring, and really rare, really, really bizarre. And I told her, your job is to heal. Like, that is your job. Your job isn't to do the dishes. Your job isn't to make sure that everything is, all of our food is cared for the next month. But your job is to heal. It is one step, one day at a time. Don't make it too complex. Don't make it so crazy. Make sure that you're focusing on what you need to be doing today, right?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
Peter, jump in there on this point, one day at a time. How are you processing that, either through some of your past challenges and, that you've gone through, or even now in, your current role in Next Gen Ministry?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's so easy to get caught up because you feel like you have to keep up. You know what I mean? You get caught up in the days because you feel like you have to keep up with the people around you. And probably a lot of people listening don't know, but I also had cancer. It was a different kind of cancer, B-cell lymphoma, and a tumor in my knee. And so one day at a time became a reality for me because I was hoping to get through that day.
Yeah.
And so I remember days after a chemotherapy treatment, man, where I literally couldn't do anything. And
just sleep.
when right, exactly. But actually, I remember one specific time where they were giving the chemo to me so fast, I couldn't feel my fingertips and I couldn't see out of one of my eyes because it was coming in. So you're not thinking about, well, I wonder what kind of vision I have for 2016 when this happened in 2015. I wasn't thinking about that stuff. What I was thinking about is, man, how am I going to make it through today? Who can I be thankful for today? And I think even, it's terrible that we have to go through difficult things to realize how special, our days really are, and the people who we're with, how special they really are. So I just, man, one day at a time is a big deal. It's a huge lesson for leaders to slow down. You have no idea what you could find out about yourself tomorrow, what good thing or potentially bad thing could come up because life is difficult. So enjoy this present moment, live in this present moment, I think is necessary.
Yeah. Dude, congrats on the cancer battle also. I wish we were there to give high five.
Yeah. Rang that bell for 10 minutes. They're like, all right, sir, you're done. I was like, no, I'm ringing this stupid bell. I was like, how much do you want for this bell? They're like, sir, that bell was donated by an individual. I was like, I don't care. How much do you want for it?
I want to take it home.
She's like, sir, it's not for sale. All right, fine. $6. Final offer. Do you take Bitcoin? I don't know.
That's right. Yeah, I think that we're so. I mean, what is it about leadership? Part of it about leadership is we put that on ourselves. Where I've got to have vision, right? I've got to have that vision that is just so sticky that people want. And the reality is, man, we just got to deal with today. We just got to get through today. And some of our kids, some of the parents that we're working with, they're like, they don't even know how to get through today. And you're going, yeah, the church's vision for the next 2 years. They're like, I don't give a crap. Can I say that on your podcast? I'm sorry.
We'll beep it out. I was too slow. I'm sorry. So here's the next point you sent me. So, and this is kind of referring to Peter, that vision of him ringing the bell, right? So you say celebrate the little wins.
Little wins.
Talk us through that.
Oh man. So yeah, there were days. Okay. So I spent 31 days and if you were offended by me saying crap before, you're really going to be offended about this. There was 31 days at Sloan Kettering Memorial Hospital. And so I had a surgery that they removed all the lymph nodes in my abdomen. And so they split me down the middle, pulled all my guts out, took the bad stuff out, threw me back together. So that's gross. All right. When they do that, all you have to do is go to the bathroom in order to leave the hospital. 31 days later, I still had not gone to the bathroom. And so I tell people all the time, if you're eating, drinking, pooping, and peeing, you have an excellent life. And you notice I didn't put that in the notes, like, because because anything beyond that is bonus, right? Like you were able to get up. You were able to eat and keep food down. There were times where I couldn't even keep food down. And then I would just like hope and pray, all right, please, please, please. And best day of my life, my 27-year-old wife, my 27-year-old nurse are sitting there in the room, and they're like, all you need to do is pass gas or poop. And I was like, oh, wait, hold on. And I had this little baby fart. And they cheered for me. I was like, why can't every day be like this, right? Because that part of your bodily function, man, is just so important, and we take it for granted, right? We don't celebrate the little wins.
Yeah.
The little annoyance takes up all of our time and all of our mental anguish because somebody was too late in the coffee line in front of us, and they forgot about their next order, so that they took too much time, or so and so was huffy with me instead of actually showing me respect, or my kids won't text me back. I'm sitting there, I'm trying to get their response, and I want to know about this element of youth group, and they're not texting me back. And we sweat the small things when in reality we need to be celebrating the little wins, in everything, giving thanks. And wouldn't prayer meeting be different if we were celebrating the wins rather than praying about the small things? And not to say that God doesn't care about the movement in the small things, but we really have a lot to be thankful for. We are blessed beyond measure, and a lot of the times the little wins we're not even celebrating at all.
Yeah,
especially this year, right?
Yeah, man.
I mean, this is a year that all of us, universally speaking, all of us, have endured something and continue to endure something that, none of us have ever been through before. And we don't necessarily feel prepared for it. So finding a way to celebrate wins, to be grateful, to choose thankfulness and gratitude. And, that does a lot for the health of your heart, right?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And there's so many things we're complaining. Like I am blown away by the amount of people that when you say something good about 2020, and the only thing that they can say is it'll be over soon, right? Like when they share the memes on social media, there are so many things. You survived without toilet paper for a couple of weeks, like that should be a win, right? Like, hey, we found a way to live without toilet paper. You were able to just survive to this point, and some of you have actually found ways to be creative and think outside the box, and it's changed the game for you in ministry or in life in general. And those are things worth celebrating, not just things that we just bypass over.
Yeah, I think too for the youth pastor who's listening, and it's like, okay, like I've heard this a million times, like celebrate the little wins. It's like, no, for like you, and we always hear people say that, and then we think, well, if I was in a bigger ministry context, or if I had more of this, or if I just had that opportunity, like I would have something to celebrate. And it's like, dude, you will never attract anything worth celebrating if you don't learn to celebrate what you have, what's in front of you right now.
That's right.
You know what I mean? It's like you have to find the joy in each season. Like sometimes the joy will smack you in the face and you're like, I have a lot to be thankful for, a lot to be excited about. But sometimes you got to go looking for it. And to celebrate the little wins is to build the right habit for the bigger season in your ministry. Like sometimes you're going through season in ministry where like, we were doing everything online for a little bit and we're kind of just like, we can't track anything. The only thing we can track is this number of viewership, and that's low. This is depressing, whatever. Like finding wins in that season. In our ministry, we started a habit where every single week we were texting in our group me like all the wins from that time, because we were desperate for something. Which now fast forward into while we're meeting back together, like that group is like the first thing I want to get new leaders in, because I'm like, look at what's happening. Get a comprehensive view of all the cool things that God has done. Get a comprehensive view of what we celebrate, because then you'll understand who we are. What started out as just a life support thing has now translated to a life-giving thing. And it all started with the little wins, man. The little wins.
Speaking of little wins, when I moved to Pittsburgh, there's Starbucks everywhere. It's amazing. I was in the Poconos. They don't really. I mean, it's yeah.
Yep.
So,
Aaron was literally tapping sap from a tree and just chugging it. You just chopping at trees, So.
Wayne, you mentioned right before we hit the go live button that one day, and I'm just speaking this prophetically over your life now, that one day you're going to write a book called Ministry Lust.
Yep.
I mean, I think
What?
the concept is great, but I think you might want to tweak the title a little bit because that's going to scare everybody away from wanting to buy that book. But here's one of the reasons why we don't want to celebrate the little wins in our own ministries is because our heart is full of jealousy and envy towards everyone else's ministry.
Keep going. Keep going.
So, no, you go. I said all that to set you up. Like walk us through that a bit, because you spend most of your ministry helping youth pastors connect and network and build relationships with one another.
Yeah.
And I would venture to say, I would imagine one of the hangups is guys in not wanting to build relationships with one another is what's happening in their own heart in regards to envy.
Yeah. No, dude. And that's one of the things that I think why we connect so well is we both have that similar heart where it's like, you need one another, right? Like we need one another. And, a few years ago, I was a part of a leadership forum and they did a personality test. It was now discover your strengths. Right. And so, it told me that I was a learner. Now, anybody who knows me that went to school with me knows Wayne's not a book learner. Wayne is not a classroom learner. Like Wayne, hey, thank you for coming and spending time at this university. We will kick you out. See you later. That is my experience. So I was like, I'm not a learner. I want to be over here. And a lot of the time, it isn't that we just want other people's ministry, but we want other people's personalities. We're not thankful for what God has given us. We're not thankful. God, I don't want to be a learner. I want to be that vibrant person who can just be just this magnetic personality and that loves people just like my favorite, preacher. And the reality is all of us are uniquely gifted and we are given a space to work out those giftings. And then even in these moments, like if it is a difficult moment, it may be because God is trying to hone a strength or hone a skill in my life so that I can get to that next space that He has prepared for me. And who knows, maybe I am in the space that God has called me for the next 20 or 30 years. So instead of us thinking about all of the shiny things that we look at other people and go, oh, I want that about them. And the Instagram, like, oh, I love that. They have a better life than me. And that comparison trap. We need to be focusing on what God has called us to do. Who is it God has created me to be? And for such a time in this moment, how can I live out my calling the way God has asked me to? And so, and it goes back to that giving thanks, right? Like that's Romans 12.
Right.
Don't be conformed to the pattern of the world. The pattern of the world is to see other people's stuff and to work really, really hard to get it because you're in America. And if you dream it, you can get it. But the reality is God's called you into a space to be faithful steward. Like my job is to steward relationships, the ministry that I have, steward my marriage, steward my family as well as I possibly can. And a lot of the time when I'm spending my time looking at other people, I'm missing the call of God that's right here in my closest circles right around me.
Yeah. So. I would say my question is what are some other things that you think, or what are some things, maybe 3 that you think get in the way of youth pastors connecting other than we talked about envy and, coveting other people's personalities and their ministries? What are some other things you think get in the way of that?
Bro, maybe insecurity. Yeah. Bro, you walk into a network meeting that isn't well run and it feels like a 7th grade homeroom. You know what I mean? Like, so there's a skill, there's hospitality that need to be happening, but I don't know if I'm just going to the wrong pastors meetings. Correct me if I'm wrong, but you walk into some pastors meetings and you're like, okay, that's the mean girls table and that's the cool girls table, so insecurity is one of the biggest things. Yeah. Am I wrong?
No, you're right. I guess I should stop wearing my muscle T-shirts to that have my youth ministry number. You know, how many kids you running? It's right here on my chest. Oh, you know.
That's right.
It's your shoes,
I
Peter.
literally,
It's your shoes.
yeah,
It's your
It's
shoes,
shoes.
man.
I was at a youth pastors retreat this weekend, and our DY, like our district youth director, kind of our network director for Michigan, he said, "Hey man, would you share a couple minutes on something that's been a game changer for your youth ministry?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." And to start my talk, I said, "I want everyone to take out a piece of paper." I said, "Go ahead and write your salary down, pass it to the person next to you." And they literally were like, "You should have saw these youth pastors." They were like, "Wait, what?" And I was like, "Okay." And then write how many kids you're running after that. See if divide it. See if you're getting paid right. It's crazy, man. The insecurities are crazy. I think that's a good one. Is there another one too? Maybe one more.
Yeah, man. Giftings, right? Like, because we are different people. So, I'll be honest. I love being around people, but I am terrible at administration. So I've like had to learn that. And so, I've found that the people who are good at administration are not really as extroverted as me. So they feel insecure. And so those different giftings, we often think about the gifts of the Holy Spirit, you know, like the gifts of the body. We think about them within our four walls of our church. And we don't think about, oh, wow, that person is gifted. And we don't think about the body of Christ in a area context. We only think about it within the church. So I think that's another one, is that we have convinced ourselves that our church has the corner on the market for the spiritual content for the area. So we don't really need other people because we've got it all right here, right?
Wow.
Like everything's right here. But when Paul wrote, he wrote to the churches of Corinth. He didn't write to First Assembly of Corinth or First Baptist of Corinth. He wrote to somebody that he knew that there was relational differences, and every single one of those letters were to be distributed amongst all those churches. So seeing the broader tapestry of the Christian community, I think, is a necessity for us as youth pastors and pastors that's networking.
Right. And if God answered our prayer, hopefully we're praying for the Lord to, you know, for us to empower us to reach our entire city. And if he did that, they wouldn't all fit in our church. You have to understand that, you know, so.
So let me ask you guys this question, because I know for me personally, I think of the list of things you just mentioned, Wayne, that can kind of be a barrier between building relationships with others. I think I've probably wrestled more with insecurity than any of the others that you listed. So for either one of you, what are some things that you did for the youth pastor out there listening right now, or they're listening back later on the podcast and they're feeling like, yeah, I got some insecurities. What are some things that you guys have done that have helped you work through that and find health in that area of your emotions?
Yeah. Wayne, you want to go first, man? You're the guy.
Well, I mean, well, the first thing that popped into my head was sarcasm, and I went out and told about 10,000 people that I only have one testicle. So, like that's humbling. That's really humbling. So beyond that,
that's a way to change a room.
Yeah. So just completely humiliate yourself in front of a group of people, and that will rid you of all insecurity. Okay, go. All right.
Self-deprecation. Yeah. No. One of the things that actually a coach in high school told me, he was like, when you feel insecure. He was saying it specifically to my basketball team, but he's like, as soon as you feel down, there are 4 other people on that court that feel down with you. And so I just started practicing that everybody was as insecure as I was. And I would just start engaging with them like I would want to be engaged with. And so that was, that's something that I'm always defaulting. I'm always going back to, like, all right, if I'm starting to feel insecure, there's somebody else out here that feels insecure. Who can I reach out to? Who can I bridge the gap for? And so oftentimes I'm going around, even in youth ministry, even at camps, I'm going around to the outsiders and I'm saying hey to them, because even though I'm up on stage, I know what it's like to be an outsider. I know what it's like to be an outcast. And I want them to feel as welcomed as the people who have their crowd. And so I want them to feel loved and accepted and seen. And so that's one of the things that I default to, is just remembering that my insecurity isn't the only one in the room.
That's so good. Hey, here's a question, Wayne. This is from Hans Nelson. He's a youth pastor out in Wisconsin. How do you keep a solid network of youth pastors in the city moving forward when there can be turnover every year or so? And I would imagine that you face that a lot, especially in your role with, focusing on networking youth pastors.
Yeah, I guess one of your big things is there's two rails of networking. One's relationship and one's strategy. And so you've got to remind yourself that you've got to keep building relationships. So you want to make sure that you are always making time to connect with the new people that are coming in. And you want to be able to include them into the process of whatever your strategy is. So if somebody's been running like a lock-in at their church for the last 20 years, and they kind of have the corner on the market, and you haven't incorporated some of those new faces into this, it's really important to find a way that you can bridge that gap between relationship and strategy. And some just know that some of the new people, they won't be as excited about the old strategies that have happened for the last couple of years, because they're innovators. They want to do something new. And so you got to create a space where they can be heard, and they can even start something that might be new. So
that's awesome. That's so good. Hey, for those of you just joining us, we're talking with Wayne Morgan from National Network of Youth Ministries. And we've been talking about a bunch of different things and a bunch of different leadership topics, but all of it stemming from Wayne's amazing and hope-inspired story about being a cancer survivor. Wayne, go back to one of kind of your spiritual lessons. You had a whole list of them that you sent to us beforehand, just some different things that God showed you in the midst of your battle with cancer many years ago. And we got a couple more minutes to kind of hit a couple more of your learning lessons there. And then we're taking your questions as well, those of you that are on the stream with us. So feel free to jot something down in the chat. We'd love for you to join the conversation.
Yeah, man. One of the things that I realized is that surviving isn't the same as abundant living. Like, are you surviving life or are you living life? And Jesus said, I have come that you could have life overflowing. And I know what it's like to survive. I know what it's like to just barely be there. I know what it's like. I remember what it's like, that mentality that you have where you're just like, oh, how you doing? Oh, it's just a bad day. And when I was in treatment, the amazing thing is that most of the people who are also doing chemo, they were living life. Like some of the people with the most horrific circumstances, with some of the most difficult barriers to overcome, they found ways to find life and to live life. And so sometimes it's through that, that extra risk that you take. Sometimes it's that extra amount of thankfulness that you have. But surviving life is not the same as living life. And I would ask you guys who are listening, for 2020, have you been surviving life, or have you been living the life, like the Jesus life, the abundant life that he's called you to in your spot right here, right now? And if not, what do we need to do to shift from just surviving to living? Because there's so much more. If we're living life abundantly, man, our evangelism efforts are so much better. our ability to connect with one another is so much better. And so, like, we've got to shift from just surviving and being okay with that to living life.
Yeah, I know. I think when everything for me, and Peter, you and I've talked about this on some of our previous podcasts and streams, but I felt this strong urge in this year of like, I'm not okay with just quote unquote saying I survived 2020. Like I want to walk out of this with something in hand. I want to walk out of this and be able to point back and say, sure, that was hard. I'm not going to ignore reality, but here's what God produced in my life or through my life, during this difficult season. And I got to, and actually, this LTG Live, that's kind of a part of it,
Yeah.
I mean, I remember I was still living in Poconos. I was sitting there we were having a little family campfire in the backyard. And Peter, that's when I text you and said, hey, we should do a live stream together, And, because for me, I was just like, man, I got to get something out of this. I can't just be sitting here, doing nothing. Let me throw that same kind of thought to you, Peter. What are some ways that you've processed this year, or even if you want to segue all the way back to when, Peter, you were battling cancer yourself, how does this point hit you about surviving versus abundant living?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know who said it, but I know it's an important quote. You're either going to get busy living or get busy dying. It's like that mentality, though. And I think, specifically in this year, like with everything, with the shutdown, like I immediately took to that and was like, and Aaron, this about me. I was like, man, it's time for me to start a business. Like I'm like, never in my life have I had this much free time at home. I'm like, I have to start something, and it's cool what God has done with that, and the clients that have come out of that, to do what I already love, in a different space, like leadership coaching, not for ministry leaders, but for business leaders, and helping create culture and review practices and things that you think people are doing, so you don't want to start them. You're like, I don't have time to do it because somebody is already doing it. And then you start having conversations with CEOs, and they're like, no, I've never had anyone ask me that question. What do you mean? Or just sitting with people. And I remember I sat with this one CEO, and I was like, we were talking back and forth on different problems and issues in the organization. And I said, so what do you pay like your executive team to do? He goes, what you just did for me. You know what I mean? I'm like, just give me a quarter what you gave them, and we'll be all right. But just honestly, even, okay, now shifting all the way back to when I was in that season going through cancer. Again, it was a time where it was a lot of reflection, and people think, you're just naturally gifted as a communicator, so you don't have to work. And it's like some of my best material that I'm just using right now came out of that time where I was able to sit with the Lord and glean and lean in a different way. And when you're hurt, when you're scarred, your perspective of the master is different. Like the woman who touched Jesus from the issue of blood, everyone saw him at eye level. She saw him from a different level, and she grasped for him differently. And I felt that when I was going through that difficult time in my life. And so not only now am I able to speak to the perspective where I see him where most people see him, I'm looking this way, but I can also revert back to that time when I'm like, man, I saw him differently there. And then also this, man, I think too, like, good communication, like just developing skills of any sort, it takes ample time. And that was the ruby, if you will, the diamond for me in both of those seasons. I was like, the thing I see here that I'll never have again is rest, is time, is the opportunity to not be busy, is all the things that were naturally on my plate are kind of like pushed to the side, and now I can focus. So I think it's just looking into every season and finding the gem, finding the rubies, like just what we call it here in our culture. It's like find the ruby in that situation, because it's good for you to then capitalize on that. It makes it can turn the worst situation into, wow, this is a gift.
Well, and Aaron, I'll be honest with you. When we had that conversation this spring, I was not looking for what I could lean into this year. Yeah. Like I really was like, I was in that surviving mentality. I was like, oh my word, like my wife is sick. All of my camp speaking's gone. Like we're in the process of looking 5 years into the future. Like how can I visioneer 5 years into the future when I don't know what 5 minutes from now is going to look like? And so like I was just like, I was in a space where I forgot, as somebody who walked through these truths, I think that these are truths because it doesn't matter what season you're in, they are true. And so like Jesus said, that he wants to give us abundant living. So what the reality is, there's something that's taking life from us. And sometimes we need people in our lives to just remind us of that. A lot of the times we need to get in God's word. We got to be immersed in prayer. And I'll be honest, that when we're surviving, those are not priorities. Right. And people aren't priorities. God's word isn't a priority. Prayer isn't a priority. And we're just trying to get through. And the reality is those are the things that are designed to give us the most life, just like you were talking about, Peter.
Yeah.
So good. I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about, and I just preached this at, the church I was speaking at this past weekend about, in Matthew 7, when Jesus ends the Sermon on the Mount, he talks about the foolish builder and the wise builder. And, the foolish man built his house on the sand. But the thing that, stuck out to me in the text and Chris Stanley, who was on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, mentioned this in a Facebook post. But that it says the foolish man built a house, and that the rain beat against it. So apparently the house was strong enough to withstand a little bit of pressure. It could handle some storms, right?
Yeah.
But it couldn't withstand, right? Whereas Jesus is saying the wise man, his house is going to withstand all of the storms, and I just thought, boy, that's such a great, I mean, of course it's great. Jesus is the one who said it, but a great reminder for the way we're building our life, right?
Yeah.
Like, are you building the type of life that it can stand as long as all the circumstances around it remain relatively peaceful or easy to deal with, or are you building the kind of life that can withstand whatever gets thrown at it? And 2020 has been one of those years, or for both of you guys, when you're staring at a cancer diagnosis right in the face, it's like, well, okay, I got to withstand this, and
One of the things that was different from cancer battle, and I don't know if Peter could agree with this or not, but when I was going through cancer, I knew people were praying for me. 2020, it feels like a prayer vacuum. And so I learned that prayer matters because I could tell when people were praying for me. I could tell, and I still can, we've got an important meeting for our organization. We just, we get people together. And so there's certain meetings that you feel the weight of. And so you ask people to pray for them. And then on the other side, you go, man, that was amazing. My cancer battle was that same area where it's like, I couldn't do this by myself. I needed Jesus to show up. I needed him to be the redemptive presence that I could not create in my own life. And I knew that prayer mattered when I was going through my cancer battle. And so one of the things that is different about COVID and different about 2020 is that I don't know if we have that same desire, that pursuit. We lean in for our neighbors, for our friends, for the unsaved, for our pastors, for our families that we serve. I don't know if we are dedicating that time. I know that prayer matters, but even, like I said, there are times that even, a couple years out, it just drifts away from my important to-do list to, bookend prayers. And so am I creating a space, and am I living out the life that says prayer matters? And am I exercising that, or am I just using it as like a slogan or a phrase? And so Peter, I don't know if you kind of could tell when people were praying for you and kind of what that did for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And obviously, I could tell that my mom is praying for me simply by some of the things that I've overcome. But during that time, I remember there were days where I legitimately felt like I was losing hope. And it sounds like you had some strength going through that. But I remember I had this moment with the Lord while I was going through cancer where I was like, God, I hate this. And if I'm being honest, I'm starting to hate you a little bit because I'm already in school trying to go pursue ministry. I don't have a lot of wind at my back. Not a lot of people are like, yeah, you can do this, bro, in my family anyway. And here I am going through this. This is hard. And I had this experience where I was laying on the floor in my room next to my bed, just kind of crying out to the Lord. And you can tell I grew up in a Christian home because I was on the floor crying out in the floor so that my mom didn't help me and come in and say, what are you talking about? What is going, so I was crying out in the carpet. And after I was done being upset, frustrated with the Lord, I began to push up to try to get back up and get into bed. And I literally couldn't, not because I was weak from the chemo or anything. I could do a push-up. I mean, I was weak, but I was a little fluffy too, but I could do one push-up, but I literally felt the presence of God. I don't know what you believe about that, but the presence of God was holding me down. And I was freaked out for a second. I was kind of like, what is going on right now? And I just, I prayed the prayer, God, I don't get this, but I surrender to you. And it was when I said that, I felt the peace, come into that room. It's like when a person enters a room, it's like the peace of God came into that room and wow. I just knew that that was the result, me praying and surrender, but also just people praying for me on my behalf, lifting up prayers of intercession for me and standing in the gap going, God, please don't take anything this guy says is serious right now. He has no idea what he's saying. You know what I mean? Like there were some people that prayed those prayers too, and I'm thankful for them.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't think God takes offense at our prayers. You read Job; he never was like, "Job, what are you talking about, man? I noticed that you're throwing some shade my direction. What are you talking about?" He never says that. He goes, "Hey, do you know how many snowflakes there are? Do you know how many cubic yards of concrete there are in the earth? Oh, I didn't think you knew that. Oh, I'm sorry." Yeah. So yeah, there's a component to our prayers where honesty and that moment of surrender, I call them holy moments, right? Where there's those moments where you're just like, hold up, something needs to change right here. Like those holy moments. And growing up Baptist, I didn't know what those were, right? So like I'd hang out with guys like Aaron to figure out like the Holy Spirit's still speaking and there's still activity and God's still trying to get your attention. And sometimes he does it through bizarre areas and you go, whoa, all right, you got my attention. And and that's what I've noticed, I've recognized about 2020 is that I'm not pursuing those areas where I'm going, hey, God, you need to get my attention. I'm going, oh, man, how do I speak better on camera instead of in person? How am I strategizing better? And a lot of the times we've replaced, and I've said this before, but I feel like 2020 is just, we've replaced the Holy Spirit and the Trinity with strategy. And so we're just going, all right, God the Father, God the Son, and this idea that I have is so good. I know it's going to be amazing. And it's like, wow, what does it look like for the Holy Spirit to shake our hearts on a Zoom call? Yeah, I don't know, but I'm really praying that God starts showing us,
Yeah. Agreed. Everything about our Jesus is supernatural. And if you only do natural things, don't expect it to be super.
I know.
It's like if you don't add an element of prayer to what you're doing, dude, this thought alone has really challenged our team. And Aaron, we spoke about it on a couple of podcasts ago. We've talked about it. Like we as a team were doing a study on prayer, and we came across Moses encountering the Lord in that tent and figured out that he was up there for a couple thousand hours 2 different times. And then it was only the second time after being up there for 1,000 hours that he came down and his face was shining like the sun, was a blinding bright. And we just talked about like, as a team, if we gathered to pray for an hour a week, that's only 52 hours a year.
Wow.
And the things we're asking him to do, are just unbelievable. Right. Moses was up there for 1,000 hours 2 times in 1 year, and we're spending 52 hours a week. It's like, and it's not about the time, but it's just like, in a culture of numbers, like that should speak to you. It's like, what are we expecting for when we give minimal thought to prayer? The apostles, even, it's like they trapped themselves in that room. They were up there for a good amount of time. Again, 52 hours a week compared to what they were doing, what they were praying for. And then the results, it's like, I don't know.
But God, I'm too important. I'm too important to be in prayer for that amount of time. There's people who need me. There's posts that need to be generated. Like I got this amazing thought that I'm sure you gave me, and it's super witty. So I'm gonna just tweet this right now. I'm just more and more. I'm like, man, what if our prayer life is the catalyst for our ministry life? And how do I generate a better prayer life? So prayer, I learned about prayer. I was forced to pray, very similar to what you're talking about. There were times where I couldn't get up out of the recliner, and I was just like, God, I need your help. And the dependency, we are so independent as humans, and in going through cancer, it taught me dependency on a whole new level.
Wow. Guys, I just kind of like, I'm just going to sit and listen. That was just so, but what both of you were just sharing there, I think so good and so compelling, so convicting. Wayne, thank you so much. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
For sharing your story. Thank you for being faithful and being faithful in ministry and being faithful to trusting God for a miracle for your life. And it's exciting as your friend and our friend as a ministry, just to see how God's using you, how He's raising you up, and what He's doing
Absolutely.
in your life and
Yeah.
through your life. Yeah, definitely. Hey, what shoe size are you? Because Peter's gonna buy you a pair of shoes because he feels bad that you've been barefoot this whole time.
Hey, Wayne.
13, no big deal. 13.
But we appreciate you being with us, and Peter, as always, thanks for being with us.
Absolutely.
Excited to be with you again next week. We'll have Steve Mason with us, and it's gonna be a great conversation. I'm sure you and I are gonna laugh a lot next week as well because he's a pretty funny dude, and
Yeah, he is.
It's gonna be a good time for sure. But hey, if you're still with us, thanks for joining us. Go check out leadthegeneration.com. And also go check out the podcast of this live stream on both Apple and Spotify. You can find us there, and always listen. And again, give us a like on the Facebook page, give us a subscribe on the podcast, and give us a review or something like that. Help us out, help us spread the word. We really appreciate it, and love you all. Thank you for being with us today. God bless.